I want to just get your thoughts on the future of the advertising agencies, since I think there are a number of those people working in ad agencies in this room.
I'm going to duck that question.
Is there a future for advertising agencies? And if so, what is the future? Is it going to be the Uhuros of the outsourced Uhuros of the enterprise?
Well, a couple years ago, I wrote a paper that's online called "The End of Advertising as We Know It." Was not particularly well received by the industry. As somebody in the television space, I've done a paper, The End of Television as We Know It, about 5 or 6 years ago, and most of that has come true. As somebody in that business, like my advertising friends, said to me, well, we don't really disagree with much of what you're saying in your papers, but we sure don't like your titles. And part of this is about putting it together and where does this take us. It doesn't mean the business doesn't continue to exist, but clearly there are differences. The consumer is clearly in control. There's clearly much more measurement now of what works and doesn't work. Clearly there's more openness about the marketplace. Clearly there are other places you can go for creative aspects of your business that go beyond what a traditional agency has done. So the idea that a traditional agency, we've already seen this, can get the kinds of surcharges or percentages off the top really is a challenged model. Just like a information publisher, and I talked to them in a paper I did called Beyond Access in 2004, the idea that they were just going to provide proprietary information and people were going to continue to pay for it when increasingly that information was going to be open and free on the web was kind of a hard model to sustain. So a lot of these businesses are under challenge because of the environment in which we live in today and the changing consumer behaviors. Because of that, the roles of agencies are going to have to be providing more value-added services, providing more analysis, providing more creative, but they're going to have competition for that, and it's not just about, we sign a contract and you pay us a percentage and we do all your work. I think it's increasingly an open market. You as individuals are going to be able to increasingly compete in that market with the big creative groups. I think they're going to have to reduce their cost structures. I think they're going to have to be more efficient. The music industry had to take 40%, 50% out of its cost structure. And I think there are lots of other businesses that are going to face similar challenges because in some cases the margins on their traditional aspects of their businesses may not be there. Having said that, if they can capture some of the value of some of the big data opportunities that we just talked about, where they sit in a place where they have ownership or participation in a lot of that data, there are new opportunities. And increasingly, we're going to be in a hits-driven business, as I call it, from my entertainment business, where they're going to be big winners, and you don't want to be stuck in the middle. And if you can create those new business models, and they're going to be constantly changing, the hits of today are not necessarily the hits of tomorrow, then I think there's lots of opportunity for them. I think they have assets to build on, as I say, data being a primary one. But they're going to have a lot more competition, a lot more challenge, and a lot more pressure on their margins.
Well, it's interesting because my background's in media, and we were always talking about partnering with ad agencies, and it didn't often happen. So, essentially, ad agencies are going to have to go where the distribution data is, right, which is media companies. Clay, before we open it up for Q&A, your thoughts on the advertising agency business?
Well, I was ducking the question earlier because I think in the spirit of titles people don't like, Bob Garfield had a book called The Chaos Scenario, which made the point that what's happening in the advertising business, to a first approximation, is that we're seeing advertising priced at its fair market value for the first time in history. Right? That's the message of Google AdWords. Right? When the scarcity premium goes away, when the demand is created not by the owner of the content but by the person who wants the content, then the premium that created the sort of odd supply and demand curve that allowed a media buyer to place a single 30-second spot, skim a couple percent off the top, and still be on the golf course by 4 is going away. So in a way, the question of the advertising agency is or agency world in general, is how good are you going to be at dealing with efficiency? The direct marketing people will do very, very well in this environment because they have always been data-driven. They actually don't care why one mail shot gets a 2% higher rate of return than another mail shot. They just do more of that. And the creative-driven part of the world, which assumes that a single media buy is going to be adequate to get this out, and where there's so much confusion about whether or not that ad is even working, that part of the business is under enormous challenges. The other thing I want to mention is something Saul talked about just now, which I think is critical, which is there is a fourth, and there is always a fourth monetization strategy, which people don't like to talk about, and that monetization strategy is lowering costs. Right? There are two ways to be profitable. One is to raise your revenues above existing expenses. The other is to lower existing expenses below cash on hand or cash coming in the door. That second strategy is really painful. It's especially hard for organizations that have had decades of stability around a previous source of revenue streams. But it increasingly characterizes in this revolution what successful strategies look like. So when I ask myself, how well will advertising agencies deal with efficiency, and how able are they to maintain their integrity as a business while getting to profitability by reducing costs instead of increasing revenues, I see a lot of organizations that I don't believe can face either of those challenges well. And when they're both coming at the same time in the market, I think we're going to see quite a lot of upstarts replacing incumbents around those two issues.
Well, I mean, an upstart has, or startup has an inherent advantage.
They had no money in the first place.
The cost, they had no legacy to defend. Yeah, exactly.